There you go. Oh, we have another person coming in. All right. And we are recording. Good. So I guess I'll let Ed.
Sure. Just one additional point of order. Can we just confirm we have a quorum? Can we just confirm we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum. We have Bob Vioringo, Doug Mason, Peter Charo, and Joe Travis. Joe Travis is on the phone, so you can't see her. But...
Okay, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Ed Parry. It's P-A-R-E. I'm an attorney at Brown Rudnick, and I represent AT&T. So on Friday, we submitted, and my apologies for the delays, but getting these plans finalized sometimes takes some time. So we revised our plans, and I'll go through those in a second, but some of the materials we provided and some of the responses that we made to address some of the concerns and questions from board members and butters. So we just reiterated that the facility does comply with the FCC standards with respect to emissions, and I think Mr. Maxon agreed with that, but I did want to point that out because that was, a significant issue for some of the abutters. We also provided a real estate study from an appraiser, real estate expert, demonstrating and evidencing that there will not be any negative impact on real estate values, which was another topic that had come up. I did address that we did conduct the balloon test in accordance with the bylaw and in accordance with our discussions with the planning board. We did seek comments from members of the public and members of the planning board with respect to particular locations. We didn't receive any of those comments, so we proceeded with our standard balloon test, took photographs from public ways, and as I said at the first hearing, 2 hearings ago, we conduct these from public ways. That's the standard operating procedure. We do not trespass on people's property. We also, don't allege that the balloon will only be, or the tower will only be visible from those specific locations, but the idea is to give a representative sample to the board of what it might look like. And in this case, I think the tower is pretty well hidden even when it's at 180 feet. You did receive a letter. It wasn't the letter that we submitted, but the letter from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with respect to FirstNet, and I'll leave it at that. The letter speaks for itself. I would note that we've had a number of discussions about coverage along the roadways, and I also want to be clear that you are going to get coverage surrounding the area of the site, including what I found was the Betty Maitland Memorial Forest. I see that there are walking trails and so forth. So I don't want to just limit. I know that we've had a lot of discussion about State Highway Route 8A, and that's key and critical for the FirstNet and public safety, but there will be additional coverage in addition to 8A. There was also a question about the length of State Highway 8A within the town of Heath. So we did a quick Google check and we came up with about 6.8 miles. I know one of the board members had asked whether, our maps suggested that it was 6 mile or 3.7 miles, but there were only 2 miles within Heath. We actually had our site acquisition agent drive the length from the Heath border on both sides along Route 8A. And it's actually 6.8 miles within the town of Heath. We won't be covering all of that with this one site, but it's just a factual discrepancy that we followed up on. So I think those are the vast majority of our submissions. This was all in the cover letter with attachments, which was emailed to Doug. I guess the one request that we have outstanding is to get the public comments that were submitted via email or in writing. back to us. That's the one area we haven't responded to. And Doug, as soon as you can get those to us or post them up on the link, I'll get a look at them and respond.
Yeah, there was, I wanted to make sure tonight that I had letters from everybody who sent them, because I got some and Cal got some and
Yep.
the BOS got some. So I think I have that document now, so I will do that when we're done tonight.
Okay.
And make sure they're all there. So I'll
So
post it and send it to you.
That'd be great. If you could give me some screen sharing authority, I'll fire up the revised plans.
Okay, let me share screen. Okay. I think you should be able to do it now.
Yep. How's that?
Yep, we can see it.
Excellent. I get better at this each time. So the focal point of the changes that we made were to address some wetlands issues that were identified by Bill Luttrell, your consulting Conservation Commission agent. So it'll be focused on the access road because the tower location remains in the same place. All of the compound features, et cetera, will all be the same. So I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit because this is the. So if the board recalls, we have added the stream, which I'm highlighting now, which runs on the western side of the property. Initially, our access road was going to be over towards the stream area and almost hug the stream area. Because of the concerns, we had a wetlands agent go out and flag wetlands. We don't believe there are wetlands on the site, or at least within 200 feet of our access drive or tower compound. Now, we're likely going to have to file a determination of applicability with the Conservation Commission to confirm that. But I did send our wetlands report to the board as part of my the documents attached to my letter. We'll follow up with Mr. Luttrell to try to pin that down. As I said, if we need to, we'll file a determination of applicability. We don't believe we're within 200 feet of the regulated wetlands. So what we did was we shifted the road, or our access drive, away from that stream area, I guess, to the southeast. And we have John Carney from Hudson Design, who worked with us on the revised access drive. So the board pointed out and asked us, or I think maybe Mr. Maxon pointed out that there were some concerns with the stormwater flow remaining on the property. I'm getting a background in my earpiece. I don't know if it sounds like running water or.
Let me see if I can.
I don't know if somebody's outside or.
I get it too.
I mean, I could proceed without it, but it's a little bit difficult. Bingo.
Did that do it?
Nope. No. All right. I'm just going to proceed.
Oh.
I can deal with it. In a comment received from the police chief of the town of Heath, he had some concerns about stormwater runoff flowing over Rowe Road, especially during the winter months where it might freeze. So we had Hudson go out and redesign the access drive to make sure, and you'll see we have a note there that all stormwater runoff will be contained on site. So we've put some bends in the road to try to diminish the sight line for the access drive off of Rowe Road. We've minimized the size of the cut to the extent we can, and I'm just zooming in here. So what we're proposing to do As I said, we've shifted to the south-southeast. We think we can limit the tree clearing for the entryway to about 35 feet. We've also proposed, assuming that the board and neighbors may have some concerns with access, we've proposed a 14-foot wide gate to prevent people who are not supposed to be on the property from entering the property in our access drive. And we've placed a bend in the road so that it's not a straight access road all the way up to the towers. You'll see the first 100 or so feet from Rowe Road here up to the bend, and then it will just disappear into the tree line. I know one of the neighbors, I believe Mr. Maloney, was concerned about the size of the road, so we did call out the approximate clearing. Now I'm going to say that this is approximate. We're looking at maybe 70 to 75 feet at this point here between the two arrows. I asked Hudson to identify the widest area. Again, that'll be blocked from view from Rowe Road, but this is necessary to deal with the stormwater runoff. And I'll have John explain if there are any particular questions, but in order to keep the stormwater on the property, we need to do some clearing. This can all get revegetated, but it needs to be cleared so that the proper development can take place and so that the water can be contained on site, and we can use this grass swell here to contain the water flow. What we did was we're keeping from Rowe Road to that swale, which will contain the runoff, 12 feet of vegetation. So it's not going to be visible from Rowe Road and will not have an impact. I would say that, from a visibility perspective, you'd have to be standing directly across from the access drive to have a clear view of the entirety of the clearing. Anything at angles, you would still see trees. We have not changed the size of the access. We have not changed the size of the access drive from the 12 feet that we proposed. So we'll minimize the tree clearing to the extent we can. As I said, our wetland scientist does not believe that we have any wetlands within 200 feet of the access road or the tower compound, and we'll deal with that with the Conservation Commission as we proceed. So that's really the extent of the changes that we made in the plans. I don't know, Doug, if you want to ask questions as we go before we leave topics, or
yeah, I'll just open that. We'll keep the maybe we'll have the public comments at the end. Keep track of your questions. But if there's anybody on the planning board that wants to ask a question now, speak up. Bob, Joe.
No.
Okay. All right, Ed, you can go on to the next.
Okay. Hang on, I just gotta switch my screen here. Give me 1 second, I'm having a little trouble with the screen.
All right, I just let in a bunch more people. Welcome everybody. Ed is presenting right now, so we'll have some time for questions when he's done presenting what's new in their proposal. If everybody who just came in could make sure they're muted, that would be great. Thanks.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
It says Zoom MA4795.
Yes.
So this is it was a little bit confusing. I would agree. The last time we met, we presented our view shed analysis, which Mr. Maxon had some comments on. This is an automated program that called VSS IVS Interactive View Shed Analysis Tool. So it gives you a sense of how visible the tower will be just based on topography, known tree cover, and other elements in the area. As we said last time, the yellow represents the top 25% of the tower, which could be the top foot or the top 25%. It's not as accurate as a balloon test where you go out and conduct a balloon test and actually see where visibility of the tower would be. Orange would represent the top 50%. So when we presented this at the last hearing, there was no depiction of where things were located except for the towers. So the black dot is the proposed tower. We added in the roadways so that the board and those at the hearing could get a reference point as to where we are. Obviously, the 43 Knott Road has the most visibility from that cleared area that Mr. Maxon talked about, not necessarily from the residents, but agreed this is a cleared area. It's upland, which is going to get a good shot of between 25 and 50% of the tower. And I know that the Wagons, I believe, stated they could see the balloon test, and this is the Wagon lot here, and you'll see there is a little yellow dot represented, so it is possible that they would see the balloon, and that confirms what they said during the first hearing. But not going to be invisible, but we think for a 180-foot tower, this represents a great location from a visibility standpoint, and you have the results of the balloon test that we provided at the last hearing. Let me see, you got that. We also had, to switch to a different topic, we also had Sohail Usami, who's AT&T's radio frequency engineer from C-Squared, do some additional work on the coverage along Route 8A. So this is let me just get the caption here. This is the existing 700 megahertz LTE coverage. Again, at neg 108, which would be, outdoor coverage, not necessarily in building. And then what Sohail did was he added in the increased road coverage that we would get from the facility. So if you recall from our coverage maps, the area here is already covered by AT&T. The area here along Route 8A, I should say, is already covered by AT&T. So where you see the white, AT&T either already has coverage or no coverage, but this is the incremental coverage based on the tower proposal at 180 feet, represented by MA 4795 by the blue star. So you'll see we pick up coverage to the south, to the east, to the north, and then some of the secondary roads you also see here in red where we're getting incremental coverage. So at this point, I think that's the overall extent of the materials that we've provided in addition to what I opened up with. We would be happy to discuss anything further, answer any questions. I'm sure there are plenty, but that's the gist of the changes that we've made and the additional information that we've provided to the board.
Okay, thanks, Ed. And can you unshare so we can see everybody? It's going to make it easier for me to call on people.
Yep, let me do that. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. That's fine. Okay, so we did have a list of questions. I think some of these have already been answered, but I think just to make it efficient, I'll run through them, and you can answer them for me, Ed.
Sure.
The first one was just under purpose. What's the primary purpose of the tower? Is it to provide service, cell service to Route A travelers, first responders, Heath residents? What's the primary objective here?
Well, as I said from the get-go at the first hearing, this isn't necessarily a commercially viable site just for coverage for the residents within the town of Heath, but it does provide roadway coverage and coverage to the areas along, outside of those roads, anything nearby the tower, obviously, according to the footprints that we've provided. So I think the real genesis is to deal with the gaps along Route 8A. We're always looking to cover significant gaps along major roadways. The secondary roads that we've identified would be the primary, but that doesn't mean there aren't additional coverage areas, including the forest that I mentioned. All of those areas will get coverage, as we stated in the C-squared radio frequency report.
Okay, and some of these I kind of already know, but I'm going to ask them to you because I have the list here.
Okay.
With a tower height of 180 feet, large parts of Heath will still not receive more coverage than at 136 feet. So what is the main purpose for going to 180 feet?
Well, that's kind of the sweet spot that AT&T is looking for. It gets us the most coverage in the area, especially with the minimal visibility. As I said, I'm not suggesting that 180-foot piece of steel rising above the tree line is invisible, but based upon the balloon test, the anticipated visibility, the number of neighbors impacted, it's a great site. And I think Mr. Maxon noted that for a 180-foot tower, it's pretty well hidden, pretty well selected as a site for wireless. So if you're going to build it at 140 feet, AT&T is barely going to get the coverage it's seeking. It's not going to provide for co-location, which is a component under your bylaw. So the idea is if we have a good site, it doesn't make sense not to maximize it so that you diminish the number of towers, which is exactly what your bylaw requires the carriers to do and the planning board to determine. So at 180 feet, we'll be able to provide co-location for 4 carriers, and the lowest carrier would be at approximately 140 feet. That's what AT&T's requested. We're not going to build a taller tower just to irritate folks or to make life more difficult for people. It's something that AT&T strongly supports. I think our data bears it out, and if that incremental coverage is an area that you're located in and have issues, then you'd want service and you'd want emergency services.
Okay, just letting someone in. Go ahead, Bob Viringo, go ahead.
We had this subject briefly raised at the last meeting, but I just want to confirm so that the board understands. At whatever level we authorize the tower company has the right, without coming back to the planning board or the community, to add 20 feet to whatever we authorize. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is a federal statute that says that an existing tower that's been approved can be extended by 20 feet. The only place I would quibble is that we don't have to come back to the town. We'll either have to come back to the town for a building permit or come back to the town for some sort of review from the planning board. So under the federal law, we have to show that we're not significantly changing the dimensions of the tower. And under the federal definition, 20 feet would be something that's allowed. So the town may not be able to deny it, but we'll certainly have to come back to the town for permits.
But your point,
the short answer, yes.
Yeah, because we cannot deny it. Once it's
correct,
done, it's done. Thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, David Maxon here. Would this be a good time to just do counterpoint on some of these things, or would you like to wait for me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, David.
I'm basically David Maxon Isotrope, working for the board on this. I'm basically in agreement with Barry on this, but one observation is that some towns have attempted to write their decisions in a way that they think will protect them from an automatic 20-foot grant in the future by characterizing the choice of the height as something that has to do with the camouflage and the concealment of the structure, which is the one exception to the 20-foot increased privilege. And the other factor is that it seems as though everyone's interpreting it that a tower approved today at a certain height is eligible for the same 20-foot height increase privilege that a tower approved 10 years ago, before the rule was in effect, would enjoy. So there's a number of variables there. So it's not an automatic giveaway. The other side of that is that 180 feet is pretty substantial, and it's likely that most carriers will be able to take advantage of lesser heights than 180. I'm just thinking of here in Medfield, we approved a tower at 150 back in 1999, 2000, with the right to increase it up to 190, given, this is before the rule went into effect, given proof that it was necessary. It was ultimately expanded to 170, but never to 190. So I expect a similar thing here, that if something that's that tall, it's likely not to really need to be expanded anyway.
Okay, I have a question. Someone came in and is not muted, and they show up as call-in user 1. Could you identify yourself, please?
Yes, I'm calling in via phone because I'm not picking up the audio on the internet. Are you asking me to hang up and not?
No, sir. No, I just wondered who you were. Are you Kevin?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, cool. No, you stay right there. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Bill Fontes, you want to say something?
Yeah, how you doing? This is Phil Fontes. Just to kind of piggyback off of what David Maxwell was just saying, whether or not the extra height is needed for functionality down the road is not really the issue as I see it. The extra height would be an opportunity to add 2 more co-locators. So whether or not, that's just more revenue for whoever owns the pole. So, I mean, I think if they come back to us for an extra 20 feet down the road, it's not going to be because they needed to make their service work. It's going to be because they would like to make a little more money.
Okay.
I can respond to that real quick. Yeah, that's a fair point. But consider that the next carrier coming in to propose to use the tower is going to save a lot of time and a lot of money if it can simply attach at the next height down. So they're going to, as they did here in Medfield, they're going to fill their way down the tower until they get to a height that's no longer useful, at which point the next carrier might consider proposing to increase the height of the tower.
Yeah, if I could also just note that there are right now 3 major carriers actively operating in the area. We think there'll be a 4th coming forth with I think I mentioned that Dish was building out a network based on the spin-off from the T-Mobile Sprint merger. So, the idea that we'd have to build the tower 20 feet higher for the 5th and 6th carriers, at least that's not the market today.
Okay. Okay, we had some people that weren't here at the beginning. Just for your information, Ed did go over the impacts of the driveway and how they were going to change the access road. And you can see those updated maps on the planning board website under the AT&T application folder. So that all of those drawings are on there if you'd like to go and see them. For the planning board, do you guys have any more questions for Ed? Go ahead, Peter Charo.
Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Ed, for your comments as well. I guess what I'm trying to get a grip on here is there any kind of a master agreement between parties who are participating in this project that defines rights and obligations? Or is this all based on a wide array of federal, state, and local laws and bylaws that all have to be reviewed and all have to be understood before we can understand what the consequences of approving this tower would be? I presume there's got to be some sort of an agreement between the property owner and AT&T, because you're obviously placing this thing on his property. But is there any broader agreement that the public would have access to, so people understand exactly what it is that we're agreeing to here if we agree to allow this project to go forward and the special permit to be issued?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the simple answer is that we will be a tenant of the property owner. So we will have what we refer to as a ground lease with the property owner. It provides for the construction of the tower, the installation of the fencing, the compound area, the access drive, et cetera, et cetera. So, from just as you see on the plans, our lease exhibit, or part of our lease with the property owner, is basically something that's similar to that, where we're allowed as a tenant to construct this tower to allow for co-location and to bring utilities to the facility. Now, you brought a question about the other frameworks for this. This starts back in 1996 with the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. And, Congress, and maybe one of the most productive things they ever did, created this small statute to allow for competition to thrive in telecommunications. So it leased licenses, leased spectrum to these carriers for a significant amount of money, and wanted to build these networks and to foster the provision of telecommunications. And the reason I say it works is because I'm old enough and my hair is white enough that I remember when I had long distance service in my house and local service in my house and a bag phone when they first came out. And I know what I used to pay for long distance calls. That's all gone. I mean, now everybody uses, or the vast majority of people use wireless as, one means of communication, if not their primary. And I'll, just as an example, which I've said many times, my kids will have probably one phone number for their entire lives. They don't worry about long distance calls. They pay that monthly fee and they use their phones for all sorts of things. In addition to the federal law, local municipalities were given or retain the right to deal with zoning issues as to where these sites should be located, how they should be located. Communities made choices based on the parameters of the federal law, as did Heath. So you have your own zoning bylaw, which spells out, how to comply. What do we bring to the planning board? What are the community's priorities with respect to wireless? Interestingly, you don't have any towers in Heath, from my recollection. Many communities have multiple towers and multiple facilities. So, someone had the foresight to at least, put together a zoning bylaw, and that's what we came to the board with. We tried to balance the visual impacts with, the bylaw. Your bylaw allows these installations by special permit. As I said, we try to pick the best site. This is not an inexpensive site, just looking at the length of roadway that we'll be putting in as part of the access drive. But we try to place the tower typically on large lots with a decent amount of screening. And I think in this instance, we found that balance where we're not going to have significant visual impact, and at the same time, we're able to produce the coverage from 180 feet. So you have federal law, the local, obviously Mass state law, and then your local bylaw sort of winnows us down to where we identify the site and we have one that complies.
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
I just want to follow up on this. Look, whatever leasing agreement you have with the property owner presumably is not publicly accessible. It's an agreement between two private parties, and it's a contract, and that's understandable. Most of what you described, though, in terms of the federal law and the state law and the bylaws and so forth, basically looks at the conditions that exist at the moment that you're applying for this permit. You tried to describe what the future is going to look like. All I know is if this law was put in place back in 1996, and here we are 25 years later, today doesn't look anything like things looked in 1996. My kids really couldn't care less about having a cellular tower because they make all their phone calls on WhatsApp. So all they're waiting for is to have the broadband installed at the house here. So I just think that the good thing about having a contract with the town, for instance, would be that you could define what the rights and obligations are of the parties going forward into the future, not just that we're complying with the rules that exist today. And I think that's something that is incredibly important to give people confidence that they're not going to be living with a future that they find much less acceptable than they find the present to be.
Well, let me say, because I deal with this issue myself, your children that deal with WhatsApp and they don't make phone. I agree. I mean, I use phone call. I rarely make phone calls myself. Everything is done, over the internet. So, I think I'm not sure that the idea is the service. So we're here to provide the service to our customers. This is, particularly for AT&T, but, other carriers will eventually co-locate and provide service. So, broadband is fine if you're in a broadband area. So if they're in your house and you have broadband, that's great. You can, do WhatsApp on your phone, but when you leave your house and you're traveling or remote, you're not going to have that coverage unless you happen to be, in Wi-Fi that, has the service and the speed that you need. So these aren't just telephones anymore. And if I neglected to say that, your kids will bear out that they're doing a lot more on their phones than making phone calls. So this will provide, if you're, as I said, if you're close enough to the tower to achieve the speeds that, it could provide, then, you'll get broadband type speeds, but it's not going to be the design here out at the highways of Neg 108 is not going to drive speeds that everybody's going to be pleased with. So, the pole itself, is part of the future. If it's not required or not in use any longer, it'll be removed. Your bylaw, has provisions to deal with that. So, if it's not going to be in productive use, your bylaw says the tower has to be removed. And that is thinking about the future.
Okay, so I have a quick question. If the planning board wanted to create such a contract, is there any precedent? Do people do that? I'm just curious.
I'm not sure what you mean by maybe I'm missing the point, but I don't know what you mean by a kind. So you're here as a permitting authority.
Yeah.
So you can certainly impose conditions. I tend to see them frequently in decisions of approval. So when you say a contract, it's
well,
to some extent it's a little one way.
not a contract. I'm saying, maybe an agreement as to what's going to be on the pole. going into the future. I'm just curious about Peter's question. So that's what I'm wondering about is have you done that? Do other towns do that? What's the precedent on that?
Well, I think the precedent is, just pure federal law. So, if you have an FCC licensed carrier and there's a pole sitting there, then, under that law that one of the other board members, I'm sorry, I don't recall the name, it allows for co-location. So the idea is that once you build it, use it. I mean, the primary purpose of a tower is to provide communications or to use the tower. So,
okay.
If you have an FCC licensee that wants to provide service, then they're going to come to the tower. I guess I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to achieve. You can certainly place conditions on an approval. Like that, I see all the time.
Okay.
David Maxon here. Again, I'd be happy to do some counterpoint, which in this case is not much different. But I think one of the things that I'm seeing is that this is your first application for this. So this is entirely new to you. And hundreds of Massachusetts towns have been doing this since the early 2000s and have become quite familiar with it and have tweaked their bylaws accordingly and that sort of thing. So to kind of reinforce what Ed Perry said, you have an application before you and you have a bylaw. And so what you're dealing with is that application under the bylaw. The fact that there's a possibility that in the future another wireless carrier might want to go on the tower is kind of secondary, but your bylaw anticipates that because there's one place where it says licensee shall co-locate under certain circumstances. So, and this is often the case, and this is with my late 1990s, early 2000s Medfield example. That's exactly what happened 20 years ago in Medfield. We approved a tower for one carrier, anticipating that additional carriers would want to use it. So that's pretty much the extent of the control you have, because each carrier, as has been mentioned, and I'm not an attorney, has the right to provide service in your community. And you have the right to regulate that under zoning, to a reasonable extent if you need to mitigate visual impacts or any other impacts that might be against the purpose and intent of the bylaw. So unfortunately, we've all been living with this. There are no guarantees. And as long as we have that acceptance, and you can put it as a condition in the permit that this tower shall be available to all other personal wireless service carriers who have an interest in providing coverage in Heath, and backstop it so that the most use of this tower possible can be made if and when additional carriers come into town. Sometimes carriers make this comment about, well, if you make it shorter, there's going to be more towers in town. Well, it's been a long time, and you're now dealing with your first tower application. So I'm not certain there's going to be a second tower application anytime soon. I see there may be a correction coming up for me, but maybe your second tower application. But in that respect, the more co-location that this tower can handle, the more likely it is that there's going to be competitive wireless service going forward.
Okay, Bob Vieringo?
Okay, just to get the facts out on towers. When I was chair of the planning board, we did approve a tower once the tower company could find a co-locator. Approved it for a 3-year span. In the 3 years, we extended it for another 3 years. Tower company could never find a client. It somewhat supports what Ed is saying about AT&T, that the sparseness of the population may well mitigate against other companies wanting to come in. If presumably the economics for AT&T is because they have a contract for FirstNet, and whatever else they can get in income is just supplementary, that's why it makes sense for AT&T. It may not make sense for another co-locator because there are no folks here, very few folks, 700 people.
All right.
Yeah, I would agree with the one caveat that, once something's constructed, it becomes a lot cheaper for the carriers. So, with the Field of Dreams adage that if you build it, they will come. I don't know that they will come, but they would be more likely to come to a facility that's existing and not having to lay out not having to put out the capital outlay where you need a commercially viable site by having, sufficient population and customer count. But as a co-location, it might be worth covering a highway if they're getting complaints or, once folks start using, phones and communications more often, then they compete. They know, where the coverages are, and, everybody wants to have robust coverage everywhere, but, not having any coverage versus a competitor having something, that enters the mix. But those are just business decisions.
Okay, I want to actually change gears here a little bit since this is our public forum. I want to give everybody else who's here a chance to ask questions, but I ask that you try to keep it to 2 minutes and keep it to actually questions that you need answered. If we probably will close the public hearing tonight. We will not vote tonight. We'll still deliberate, and we'll still have time to ask questions. And I will publish all of your letters. I see a bunch of people here. I've made one big PDF that has all of your letters that I will post after the meeting. So I'll open it up now to the public. And you can just raise your hand, or if you're on the phone, you could just start talking.
Yeah, so, this is Kevin. Do you want me to start talking?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm somewhat concerned that the applicant hasn't seen the letters that we've sent in, because there's been a number of questions that I've included in those letters, and I think some of these things are things that I've addressed there in the meetings as well. But in general, there's a number of outstanding items that I have, so I'm really concerned with the intent that the planning board is going to close the public hearing tonight.
Okay, well, Kevin, why don't you ask the questions directly that you have not had answered, and I am going to send all of the letters to Ed, and I'm going to publish all of the letters tonight on the planning board site. But you go ahead and ask if you have specific questions that you need to have answered. Go for it.
Okay, so I think one point I made at the last meeting was that the wetland delineation, I'm not even sure to what extent wetlands have been delineated. I know there was a document that was put up this previous Friday. I think the documents being placed late on a Friday when the meeting is on Monday is a little bit doesn't leave us much time to review the documents. Fortunately, I went back to the website on Saturday, viewed the documents. I saw there was a 1.5-page environmental report, which is the extent of, I think, the environmental reporting that was done. I noticed the new design now avoids the stream where the previous design, so the delineation, what appears to be some environmental delineation was done in December, where it is typical to require that the wetland delineation occur during the growing season. And it is sort of interesting that even though the one sort of body of water that was identified and has been delineated is the stream, but then the roadway design, the driveway design that was developed in January and February went right over the stream for approximately 200 feet. I'm requesting that an appropriate wetland delineation during the growing season occur. And I guess I'm just wondering if the applicant plans to do more wetland delineating.
Well, I just got to say that that the Conservation Commission did have questions, and we will talk to Bill Luttrell and make sure that that any wetlands that he came up with are satisfied with the new drawing. We're still going to do that, and that question will not get ignored. We are going to have to, but I'll have to talk directly with Bill Luttrell and make sure he feels that this has been addressed.
So
Doug,
will that get addressed prior to a decision being made by the planning board?
Absolutely. It will definitely get addressed. But let me, Kevin, I'll come right back to you, but Ed wanted to say something about that.
yeah, if I could, and that's a good point. I think that's Mr. Maloney, is it?
Yes.
Correct.
So we shared our plan. First of all, as I said, we sent our environmental consultant out there. We didn't flag wetlands because she didn't identify any wetlands, but I fully agree that it was done in December. We're in the growing season now. We have submitted the plans to Mr. Luttrell on Fridays. You received them. I wouldn't say it was late in the day on Friday, but I acknowledge they came out on Friday, and we, immediately sent them over to Doug and posted them up on the website. I do think that we need to have a further discussion with Mr. Luttrell from the Conservation Commission. He came back with some additional questions. So Doug, with respect to closing the hearing, in order to be able to respond on those issues and also to respond to those letters that Mr. Maloney and others may have provided, I will kind of acknowledge that the hearing would have to stay open for us to do that.
Okay.
So if he's provided a letter and the board wants to see our response to it, it needs to be done at the public hearing so that you can take it into account in your decision. The other thing that I wanted to raise, there was a question about us identifying through stakes the access drive, so you could see exactly where it was. I think, Doug, you may have asked us if we could stake the access drive, and which we will do, but we certainly couldn't do it from Friday to Monday, but we'll stake it out. So I'm not one for delay here, but on the other hand, I do want to have a robust discussion. We want to respond to everything so the record's not incomplete, and that we don't face a situation where we come back in a month and the board, seeks to reopen the hearing, and then we have all kinds of notice issues. So, based on what the board was requesting as far as the staking is concerned, and whether an additional site visit would take place, we were anticipating that the hearing would remain open, give us the opportunity to fully respond to all of the questions and concerns, via email or placed in writing as part of the record. Otherwise, those go unresolved. So, we're happy to accommodate that process with the board. And as I said, I do think we have to have additional discussions with Mr. Luttrell, get him comfortable. And again, we may have to do some flagging during this growing season and determine if we can get his comfort level to the point where we don't think we have an issue with Conservation Commission, then I think we could proceed. And if Conservation wants us to file something, I don't think that has to hold up this process. But I do think we need to communicate with Mr. Luttrell and get that buttoned up so that we know that if the planning board approves something, it'll either get approved by the Conservation Commission or we have to get to the Conservation Commission for, a determination of applicability.
Okay. That sounds great. I'm fine with continuing, but how about, does anybody on the board have any comments on that? Go ahead, Bob Vieringo.
Just that we keep moving the clock if we delay the closing the hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we extended the shot clock out to the middle of September, so I don't see any issue at this point that we won't easily make that. I think this will be the one remaining third-party review that needs to take place. Everything else will be something that we control and the planning board controls.
Okay. Anybody else on the planning board? And Kevin, does that satisfy you if they're going to respond directly to your letter?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously what was being discussed was the need for a growing season wetlands delineation, which I think definitely is needed. I see other potential stream beds and things like that. What appears to be the roadway path, the driveway path. So yeah, I mean, I think everything that was being said, I think sounds better. I do have a couple more points if I could quickly just touch upon them. I mean, they are covered in my letters, but I would like to just touch upon, I think probably just three more quick things.
Go ahead.
Okay, so one thing I mentioned at the last meeting was whether or not there had been any NEPA or MEPA filings, and I think I got confirmation that there had been one or the other, but I'm not sure which one. But then nothing's been released or uploaded, and so if there's been any type of filings like that, I definitely want to get the information with respect to all the appropriate numbers and so forth, so that I can get copies of those filings, and then if there's comment periods, that comments can be made.
Yeah, so we are undergoing our NEPA review. So just, NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act that all federal licensees and stakeholders have to go through with respect to, hang on one second. I'm sorry, I got distracted there. So NEPA is something that each of our sites goes through. We are in that process. We're expecting to get our consultants' report back. So it's a number of things. We have to visit with the local historic and national historic folks to see if we have a negative impact on historic, fish and wildlife, tribal concerns. So there's a whole host of environmental. We're expecting to get our NEPA back in July, but each time we have these modifications, like a road change, that sets us back a little bit. So, we have to comply with NEPA, so we can get you the report when it comes out, but it's something that is under the control of the federal agencies, basically, and we do have to comply. So we will have to show that we don't have an impact which would warrant an environmental assessment. If we get the report and this proceeding is still going on, we'll certainly share it with you. As I said, we're expecting it in July. It's possible with this roadway switch that, we have to deal with other areas of fish, wildlife, endangered species, wetlands, plants, etc. So you'll certainly see it in the end. If we have it during the hearing, we'll certainly provide it.
Okay.
So Ed, let me just say one thing, Kevin. So Ed, that means that you'll put those reports on the same page with all of the other links that we have?
We will. It's typically a pretty hefty report. I mean, they'll run in the hundreds of pages. But yes, if and when we get it, we will provide it. But I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to have a tremendous amount of impact on an abutter's view of the parcel. These are all federal compliance issues. So that, again, it's to avoid an environmental assessment impact statement. So for example, we reach out to Fish and Wildlife to show them that we're not having any impact. So there are 7 or 8 agencies that we reach out to. Our consultant puts together a report pursuant to NEPA. But it's very fact-based. So, Mr. Maloney, it's, if Fish and Wildlife say it's not going to have an impact, I can share the report I can share their findings with you, but it's not a situation that, there's anybody else is making any decision on it. But we have nothing to hide. If we get the report, we'll share it.
Okay, yeah, no, that'd be appreciated. I'm a civil engineer. I work with environmental scientists, but I'm not an environmental scientist, so I don't know the specifics. But I'll follow back if I have any follow-up questions with respect to that. I think the last major thing I have is just, you know, I at each of the public meetings I've made a statement with respect to that the facility is the entire facility and not just the tower, and there continues to be a focus on just the tower. Now I understand, you know, your report indicating what revised indicated that the part of the change of the driveway down where it comes into Rowe Road was made for visuals reasons. So that does appear to be an understanding, at least somewhat of an understanding of the issue. I still think that given, you know, sort of the site that's been chosen and the challenges associated with the site, it's necessitating a very wide road. And I understand, you know, like right, like for 5 feet, you know, you have the width of it is 35 feet, and then, you know, it widens for, you know, sort of goes around a corner. But I highly suspect it's going to be very visual, that you're going to see this 50-foot wide swath going up that area off of Rowe Road. And I think it's going to be very distinctive. And I think, you know, one of the key responsibilities that the planning board needs to address in whether or not they're going to approve a special permit, you know, has to do with, you know, preserving the rural quality, character, and overall apparent lack of development of the town. And, you know, we're just really concerned that this proposal, in its entirety, the overall facility is just not going to be appropriate for this part of Rowe, and part of that is the specific site that's been chosen. I also noticed that you've now put a gate down at Rowe Road, and that was one of the things, you know, I had noticed before that you didn't have that, and I actually appreciated that there wasn't something there, because, you know, one of my concerns initially was to what extent was this going to look like, you know, chain link and some type of facility, which is not something that I think any of us, you know, there's not, you know, there seems to, you read all the reports and there just seems to be a lack of understanding of what the community of Heath is and why people choose to spend time and own property and live in Heath.
So if I could, are you all set?
Yeah.
So just in response, so, you know, we shifted the road. I mean, for the most part, I mean, I think it helps with some visibility, but it's going to be, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a 12-foot wide gravel access drive that you're going to see. Will be clearing trees, but you'll be looking into other trees. The gate, I added the gate, frankly, to, you know, give some, you know, sense of security for you, frankly, but, you know, other neighbors that may have concerns. We're not looking to spend additional money. If the planning board doesn't want the gate because you don't want the gate, that's fine with me. It was added on, frankly, to address your concerns. I thought part of your concern, in addition to visibility, was, you know, having folks use the drive. You know, we get that frequently. I noticed there was no gate. The gates, you know, we could put a single bar gate, but listen, if you're not interested in the gate, we're not interested in having one. So, you know, it was done purely to deal with
No,
to deal with an access issue.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think what goes there would be critical if this thing was to be approved. I think in general, I really feel it's the wrong place for this facility, and therefore don't want the facility. But if there is a facility, then maybe a gate is appropriate. I just want to make sure it's not a chain link type fence gate, you know, which I think would be totally inappropriate. But
yeah, I mean, I sort of anticipate. I mean, from my view, a typical gate for these wireless facilities are, you know, 2 bollards with a, you know, some kind of bar that goes across it, that's locked and gets open when the site acquisition person, you know, drives up on, you know, into the gravel access drive a little bit and then opens the gate. But, you know, just to be clear, you know, this access road may be, you know, for this tower facility, in this particular location, but the property owner could put his drive in if that's what he chose to do, with or without the tower. So, it's not a matter of this land has to be, I don't represent the property owner, but it's not that this land gets, protected and preserved in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
If in fact, the property owner, was going to try to access, that area up, in the back for whatever reason, he wouldn't be before this board. He would go and do it by right. So, while it's an access drive that, has the tower linked to it, it's not something that's an impossibility, and, just for the property owner's own purposes. So it's, and we didn't, if I could just finish, and we did include, the bend there so that we would, mitigate to some extent the, area that would be 70 or 75 feet in clearing, but that's just going to be clearing. We're not, proposing anything other than the 12-foot access drive, as things grow back. And if you're standing on the access drive, then, it would look clear. But if you're down at the roadway, you're going to see trees on the backside. There'll be clearing, but you'll see trees. It's going to be a dirt access drive.
Okay,
I understand your point because, and I'll wrap this up quickly. I know other people have comments and so forth, but I do think that the standards that you're building this driveway to are considerably more sort of restrictive because of how it will be used during construction, and possibly for maintenance of this type of facility. That would be different if a driveway was built for residential use. So I think that primarily covers my points, and then the letters that we've written cover these points in much greater detail. So it'd be appreciated when you get to see a copy of them and you can respond to all the different issues.
I will. I look forward to it.
Well, thank you.
all right. Thanks, Kevin. Bill, you go ahead. Bill Fontes. Oh, where'd Bill go?
Yeah, how you doing? Yeah, I appreciate it. So just to kind of follow up on what was just being said about the gate, just if this was to get approved, maybe one way around, because I think a gate is a good idea, but I do think it may be a little unsightly down at the road. I noticed that the road goes up, and at about 100 feet it bends. Maybe the gate could be put just after that bend, and you kind of accomplish both things. You'd give some security for the site, and not have it right out there for everybody to see. So just something to throw out there.
All right.
We have no problem with that. It comes down to, where the gate would fit best from a visibility standpoint. And, if we've cleared an additional area for the only thing that I'm thinking is, as you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, we'll just put it up, up at, where the bend is. The problem is that you're going to have additional clearing on both sides. Somebody may drive around it. They wouldn't be on the road anymore, but it may defeat its purpose. But we could put the gate wherever the planning board would prefer to see the gate. If it's unsightly, we're happy to eliminate it. It's a cost that, frankly, we'd prefer not to incur. It was I agree it's a minimal gesture, but it was something I thought there might be some concerns with access, because Mr. Maloney is next door. So I thought it's something we could add, but we could put the gate anywhere or not have one. There is a lock gate at the compound. When you get up to the actual tower, it'll be surrounded by chain link fence. Nobody can possibly see the compound itself, but that gate would also be locked. But if we want an access gate, we're happy to do that.
All right. Anybody else from the public have any questions?
Have to be a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I just don't see how you could possibly put this tower up and preserve the rural nature of the community here, at least not for myself and my neighbors. Also, going back to this balloon test, I just want to point out that this wasn't a thorough test. I mean, they didn't make any honest effort to see how there was the visual impact of the neighbors. You could see that tower, the balloon at my house, and my neighbors are about 100 feet higher than me in elevation, and that's the area that may be affected. You know, the area they thought would be affected visually, they didn't take an honest effort to go look at, and you know, and there's more areas that are obviously affected. So I just don't believe that you can preserve the world, you know, the duty that Heath would amp it up that tower. I just also don't see any reason to add the extra height. No valid reason other than money. It serves us. You know, I don't have a cell phone, and I like that. My wife doesn't have a cell phone, and she's fine with it too. One of the reasons people move to the country is to get away from this stuff.
Okay, well, we do have your letter. We have all your letters, and we are going to take that into consideration. I also want to mention that I am going to, the property owner and AT&T have given me permission to walk the driveway and to fly a drone at various altitudes to be able to see what it looks like. Another thing that I'll be able to do is I'll be able to take a panoramic image from there, which will show us, I think, in a even more detailed way where you'll be able to see this from. If I could see your house from 136 feet and I could see your house from 180 feet, it'll be more accurate than the balloon was with the wind and everything else. So we are going to do that. We are going to, in fact, right now, I will let people know when that will be. My guess is we should do it at like 6 o'clock in the afternoon to give people time to get home from work. And I would propose that we do that. Let me look at the calendar. We could do it next Wednesday, or we could do it the following Wednesday. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll put this out. What do you think, Planning Board? When do you think we should do it? Maybe even Monday the 5th, which is a 4th of July weekend. Maybe we'll have the most people around then to look at it. Do any Planning Board people have any comments on this, on when to do that? No. How about abutters? Do any abutters have any questions or any ideas about what would be a better day? Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
For myself, Kevin, it doesn't matter. I'll make myself available and be here.
Oh, okay, Kevin, you're here. You're around.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool. Well, I think I'm gonna just say Wednesday, the 7th. Go ahead, Nina Marshall.
Sorry, I have something else to say, not on this day selection, so why don't you proceed with that, and then I
just
comment.
Okay, I'll let Nina comment next, but I just want to schedule this while you're all here. And Ed, did you have a question about scheduling? You're muted,
Me?
Ed. Yeah.
I do not have a question on the schedule.
Okay. Then let me just
real quick, just to fill in, to remind people, this is a great opportunity to take photographs from your own property. A couple of pointers. One is to take photographs with a standard, what would be a 50mm lens for a standard 35mm camera. It might be a different number of millimeters if you have a different kind of camera, but that standard focal length gets you that sort of natural perspective. But on the other hand, if it's a drone, it might be pretty tiny. So you might want to take a second shot from exactly the same spot with your zoom lens so that your camera can identify where the drone is in the photograph. Then that's important because you can submit that to the record. The board needs to have substantial evidence in a written record. So be sure to put your address and any other information that's pertinent to the photograph on it when you submit it.
Hey, Doug, how big is the drone? Do you have like a military grade drone, or how big is the drone exactly? Just approximately.
It's approximately, well, I have several, but my biggest one, which I would use, is approximately 2.5 feet, 2 feet. And I might be able to figure out a way to make it more visible with some like orange tape or something. I'll think about that.
Okay,
But
thanks.
I think a big part of this is going to be the panorama that I take from there. If you could see a house, then the house can see you. And the same thing with a field. I think that will be very telling. So I'm going to schedule that for Wednesday, the 7th at 6 o'clock. And I'm going to say that the alternate date, if the weather is bad, is going to be the 14th. And I will publish both of these on the calendar for Heath. And I will probably be, it'll have to be pretty specific time-wise. So it will be at 180 feet at 6 o'clock, and it will be at 140 feet at 6:10. But I'll put the specifics on a note on the thing. Maybe I can do it for longer. Maybe I can do 2 flights or something. And one other thing, if I think, Ed, are the specific coordinates for the site, are they the GPS coordinates? Are they on the map?
They're on the plans.
Yeah. Okay. So even if I can't take off from the site, I can still fly to the site, and it will be in exactly the right spot. Okay. So I think Nina Marshall and then Ed Whitaker would like to say something.
Okay, thank you, Doug. The first thing is a question. Are the dates July 7th? I assume it's July 7th, July 14th. Is that in the morning or the evening?
Evening, because I want to do it when people are available.
Okay, then the second is actually a comment for Ed Parry, and I noted that you said that you would like to, or you plan to talk to the historic people, I think you described them as, and so I'm just interested to know what your plans are, who you're going to talk to. I'm a member of the Heath Historical Society and the Historical Commission, and I haven't weighed in on this topic yet, but certainly can do so, and I'm eager to know what you are planning, or what you were thinking of in terms of this conversation. Thank you.
So I don't know if obviously they have not reached out to you. So as part of NEPA, we go through the State Historic Preservation Office at the Secretary of State's office in Massachusetts. They will typically reach out to the local folks for projects that are seeking some sort of, I don't know that it's an approval so much as a, no significant impact determination. We can follow up with our consultant to see where we are in that process. But as I said, we're required to comply through NEPA. We will be reaching out to what we refer to as, you'll probably recognize SHPO, which is the Massachusetts State Historic Preservation Office, and the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. I'll try to get an update as to where we are with that, but I guess to some extent, I'm a little surprised you haven't heard from them, but I'll try to find out where that is in the process.
Thank you, Ed. I think that would be very good to know where we are in the process, as well as, of course, to see the documents when they are produced. And I'm also very interested in what the DCR, the Fish and Wildlife Service, has to say, and how they collect their information, what surveys they do, so on and so forth. Yep. So both of those topics are of interest to me personally, and of course to the town.
Right. Yeah, we don't file an application unless we're within the jurisdiction of the historic district itself. If you have a district, or I'm assuming downtown, you have some sensitive areas, but like I said, under NEPA, we're required to reach out to the state historic. So as I said, I'll try to find out where they are in that process. If I can get an answer from Massachusetts, or if they're intending to reach out, I would have expected there would have been a notice in the newspaper there about the proposed installation, but again, I'll find out and I'll share that with Doug, and you'll see, something posted, or, we'll have a definitive response as to where what the status is.
Okay, Ed and then Jonathan.
Thanks, Doug. It occurs to me that this is in many respects a unique proposal in that the town doesn't have any cell towers, as others have mentioned. The rural character of the town and the board's responsibility to maintain that rural character. And so kind of along those lines, should there be more discussion and perhaps hiring some outside counsel to investigate the potential impacts to the property values of homeowners such as us or our neighbors who are going to be closest to this facility? Again, when you consider the fact that there are no other towers in this area. So that's one thing I want to mention for your consideration. The other is this 20-foot permit by right extension. Should the board be, should that balloon test have been at 200 foot? Should the 110 be considered as 130? Because I think it's fair to assume, and I think the board should assume, that that extra height will be added. If it isn't, so be it. But shouldn't the board assume that's going to be the case as, a possible scenario down the line?
I don't know if that's a question to the board or to me.
Yeah, we certainly have to take that into consideration that it could be higher. I think Ed answered that from AT&T's perspective, but as far as the town goes, we have to know that could happen. And I don't think we have to change the balloon test or the drone test. We just have to do it and realize it could be 20 feet higher. Anybody else on the board want to weigh in on that?
Mr. Chairman,
Joe?
David Maxon. Just to reiterate, with the help of counsel in writing a draft decision, which I strongly recommend because this is involving the Telecommunications Act, you may be able to backstop that risk by doing the wording that some other towns in the state have been attempting to apply, so that it in effect precludes the application of that 20-foot allowance by right. Or alternatively, I've suggested this at a number of hearings and no one's taken me up on it yet, is to grant the applicant a height that's 20 feet lower than intended and allow them to invoke their right to extend the tower, their one-time right to extend the tower at the time of construction, so that it ends up being at the height and it's capped because they've invoked their one-time 20-foot height extension.
Thank you.
Right. And my comment here is that we've applied for 180-foot towers, so that's what's before the board. I would agree that I'm not going to give the board legal advice, but I would strongly suggest that if you're going to attempt to place a condition as such, if you really want it to be effective, if it can be effective even, I would agree town council should be involved in drafting conditions of an approval, and whether they're effective or not is a whole nother topic. But I can tell you AT&T would be happy with 180 feet, however you get there.
Okay. Just so everybody knows, this is a complicated decision, and we will definitely review it with council before we do our final project. So thanks, David, and yes, we will consider that. Ed, did you have more, Ed, or should we move on to Jonathan? I'm not sure if you were.
I think the first part of what I discussed kind of got lost in the mix in the second part, which was what consideration should be given to the possible impact on property values of our property and our neighbors.
So you can get an opinion letter. It just has to be a letter. It doesn't have to be an involved study, but you can go to any local realtor and get letters from them. And I would do that and confirm or not confirm your belief that it'll reduce the property value, and just have that in before we actually close our public hearing. And that becomes part of the public record.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney, but in my experience, the weight of an appraiser's opinion tends to outweigh the weight of a realtor's opinion in when these things are adjudicated. Again, that's something the town council can advise you on.
All right, Jonathan Marin, I think you were next.
Thank you, Doug. I guess I have a comment and a couple of questions. One is, well, just that I'd like to point out that I put in the chat a link about property value loss for abutters, and if possible, I'd like that to be entered in the record. I also put a link, a page about cell tower fires. I'm sorry if this has already been covered, but I live at 224 Elizabeth Road, just over the Heath line in Charlotte, but my mother actually had an offer on a house accepted today in Heath, and so she'll be moving to Heath. And given that relationship, one concern I have is about cell tower fires and the likelihood with global warming of drought situations. And in that vein, two questions. Ed, one question is, who would be liable in the event of a cell tower fire that damaged property? Who would be liable, whether that would be AT&T or the property owner or the town or nobody? And then a second question was, given that the relatively few number of customers that this is going to serve, I was wondering if Ed had an estimate or knew exactly how much federal money AT&T would be receiving for putting up this tower through the FirstNet funds or through other granting through the FCC. But before Ed answers the questions, I guess I'd just like to reiterate my opposition to the tower based on rural character issues, property value issues, quality of life issues, and the impending, I'll leave it at that. Ed?
So with respect to federal money, I mean, AT&T has a contract with the FirstNet Authority, so I couldn't possibly tell you how that gets, detailed if it does or doesn't flow to site specific. So it was pursuant to an RFP process that the federal government went through. I am not aware of any grants whatsoever for this property. As I said at the first hearing, this is probably not a commercially viable site, just from an AT&T's perspective, but it is a significant upgrade in this area of Massachusetts to deal with, the first responder network, FirstNet. With respect to fires, and Jonathan, we went through this recently in another jurisdiction. So the steel itself doesn't burn, so the tower is not going to burn. But, from time to time, we have some folks that, may not use best practices and maybe welding and catch coax cable on fire. So if you go on the internet, and I'm sure Jonathan has circulated some links for you, it is possible that plastic or rubber or whatever the coax cable is coated with could possibly catch fire. And then it looks like the tower is burning, which, it is from the inside, but it's the coax cables burning. With respect to liability, sometimes there is no liability for anyone in particular. I'm not quite sure how the town would be liable. You raised that as one example. Property owner could be liable. Liability flows from negligence. AT&T could be liable. It could be a trespasser that's liable. So it's a little hard to say who would be liable. I could tell you that if AT&T is the cause of damage, AT&T is a big enough company that's going to get sued and may be liable. But I mean, every circumstance is different. Who knows, how damage may occur. There could be a, truck that runs off the road and, hits our gate, and, that driver is liable. So, there's a whole world of possibility, but, there would have to be some sort of negligence, some sort of right, either under statutory or common law, so that somebody's liable. But we're a tenant, just like, a landlord-tenant relationship with this property owner. If we cause damage, we're liable to the property owner. If we have an obligation or duty to third parties, we may be liable, being AT&T, that is.
Joe, did you have a comment?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right, Tara?
Hi, Doug. Thanks. Just a quick question. When does public comment period close for this?
It closes after we close this public hearing, which we're going to continue tonight.
Okay, but what about, photos, site photos, further letters?
That would also close, and it's a good point, that would also close after we close the public hearing. So we'll continue the public hearing. The planning board's going to have to figure out just how long we'll continue it. But the shot clock does go till September. So we will have plenty of time to still continue the public hearing and still deliberate and have a planning board meeting about our decision. So we have 2 weeks, I would guess, but we're going to decide that when we get finished talking here. Then the planning board will decide how long to continue it, and we'll have to vote on that. Did you have is 2 weeks seem like a reasonable time to you? Okay. All right. So yeah, the planning board we will figure out the date for that as soon as everybody's done. Now, does anyone else want to bring up any questions from the public? All right.
David Maxon here with just a quick thing for Nina. If people want to Google FCC Nationwide Programmatic Agreement, it's a mouthful, you will find the National Historic Preservation Act guidance for siting cell towers and cell facilities in relation to historic assets.
Thank you. Okay, planning board, do you have any more comments? All right, well, I would entertain a motion that we continue this meeting. Well, first of all, on the planning board, how long do you think we should continue this? Should we continue it for 2 weeks? Is that enough?
I don't think that's enough. I'm not on the planning board, but I don't think that's enough. Your answers.
It's fine. You can answer too. We want everybody to be satisfied. Hang on. I'm trying to find a calendar. So, Ed, how long do you think is enough for you to get if you get all these letters tonight and you need to answer some, you need to do some wetlands testing or marking?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to I can get responses to the questions unless there are volumes of them. I can be responsive within a couple of weeks, but I do worry a little bit about getting the wetlands flagged, having them picked up, and then getting with Bill Luttrell. And if we have to revise our plans, then revising our plans. So I would suggest if the board were amenable, I'd respectfully maybe suggest the 26th, which is a Monday. Is the preference Mondays? It doesn't matter to me, obviously. But
Actually,
I mean, if we could,
I would say we'll ask the board, but I understand that week is good. What does the board, that week works for me. What do you think about that timeline, planning board? Bob Vieringo.
The 26th is good for me, and I think it would cover any of these issues that require some time.
Okay. My schedule is now pretty crazy on the weekends, so I would suggest the 27th, 28th, or 29th. 27th or Tuesday or Wednesday being the best for me. Is the planning board available on the 27th and 28th?
Yes.
Bob, yes.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
If I could ask the board's indulgence, I have a commitment on the 27th. If we could do the 28th, that would be great.
Okay, board, how about the 28th?
Joe, yes.
This is
Doug,
David.
yes.
Are you in the middle of a vote?
No, we're just,
Okay,
we're
okay,
just
good.
honing in on a,
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know that I'll be out of pocket. It sounds like most of what you're dealing with is not wireless stuff, but when you get to, if your decision is favorable and you get to crafting conditions, I can work with the chair or with council.
okay,
Don't necessarily need to be doing it during the meeting, but I can help with that.
thank you. Okay, so, who has their hand up? Oh, that's not, nobody does. And Peter, did you chime in on the 28th?
I think the 28th is good. We live in uncertain times, but I will do my best.
Okay, it is virtual, so you could be wherever you wanted to be.
Thank you.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion that we continue this public hearing for AT&T's proposed cell tower to July 28th. Anybody want to make that motion?
At 7?
At 7 o'clock, yes. Bob seconded that.
Seconded.
Bob made the motion and Peter seconded it. Okay. All in favor? Say aye. Doug, aye.
Bye-bye.
Peter,
Joe,
I.
Okay. All right, that's unanimous. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I think we can now close the meeting. I make a motion that we close the meeting at 8:41. Or not close, no, continue. I'm sorry. I make a motion that we continue the meeting at 8:41, which sounds weird, but that's the way it is. Anybody second?
Second.
All in favor? Doug, aye.
Bye-bye.
Peter, I.
Joe, I.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Have a nice holiday.
Yeah, you too.